I don't have to tell you that our world is in chaos right now. And I won't patronize you or any of us by giving false security or shallow hope. I will first lay out the serious issues we face as a global community, and then look at the readings and identify places where we may find meaning and potentially a way forward. We are in the midst of a second wave of a pandemic that has killed more than 1.07 million people worldwide. In Canada, we have had over 9,627 deaths, over 1,300 in Toronto alone. Our second pandemic is the tainted drug supply. This year, between January and March, over 1,000 people have died of overdoses. 77% involved fentanyl. Climate change. We all know that our climate is warming. Scientists warn that not only wildfires and drought, floods and hurricanes, but more of them and of increasing intensity. According to the United Nations, income inequality has risen sharply since the 1970s in most advanced economies around the world and has been blamed for increasingly polarized politics. Following the terrible deaths of Black men and women at the hands of police in the US and Canada, we proclaim that Black lives matter and continue to call out for justice for our Indigenous sisters and brothers. We have over 9,000 homeless people in Toronto who have been especially vulnerable during the pandemic, crowded like our seniors in our long-term care homes, but fortunately without the extreme loss of life. Many have now been housed in leased hotels across the city, finally receiving some dignity of a room of one's own and a bathroom. But then the overdose deaths have increased. The needs in the hotels of now isolated individuals have escalated, and many have complained of the quality of the food. We need to keep crying out justice for these individuals so that no one is forced to live in a tent to be safe from a virus again, and decent shelter is seen as a basic human right for all, and not the luxury of only those with higher income. And more homeless people have died of overdoses than COVID. I want to pause and let these issues sink in a bit before I move on. The pandemic, overdoses, climate change, inequality, racism, and homelessness. We human beings are very smart, but we have been brought to our knees with the enormity of these catastrophic issues. Gone are the days when we can believe that endless material progress will solve all these problems. Facing looming catastrophes alone would be terrifying, is terrifying. Facing things together as a community with our friends and family gives us some sense of consolation and shared urgency. But like a global world addicted to our comfort, capitalism and its attendant buffers against suffering for those of us with wealth and privilege is heading us straight towards disaster for everyone on the planet. This isn't said to make us all collapse into a heap of guilt. The truth is, even with our wealth and privilege, it isn't enough right now to solve all these problems. So what if we tried to look at this from another angle? Let's step back and look at these issues courageously and with the eyes of the Spirit by turning to the readings highlighted for today. First, there is the writing of Martin Luther King Jr. from 1967. He says, "A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. Over 50 years ago, and Dr. King's words echo prophetically even today, without a true revolution of values, how can we solve these incredible challenges facing us? It's not enough to have technological progress. Our progress is what has led us to this place. Martin Luther King Jr. was part of a handful of individuals who saw clearly the problems of the day and helped bring about significant change. One of the remarkable things about Dr. King's ministry is that, unlike what government figures would have us believe, he didn't just insist on civil and voting rights for Black Americans, as important as that was. He brought together income inequality, war, imbalances of power in the world, and critiqued all economic systems, but particularly identified capitalism as the cause of much of the world's suffering. Clear and passionate truth-telling and a call to action. And in Matthew, over 2,000 years ago, worldly leaders tried to trick Jesus. Then give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but give to God what is God's. Who is Caesar in today's world? In Canada, I posit to you, it isn't the government or the taxes we pay, as is often suggested in commentaries on this passage. Caesar in Canada is capitalism. What a radical statement to make in a homily, you might be thinking. But wait, it's Holy Trinity, so it's okay. But let's go into this a bit deeper. Caesar, or the god of our modern world, is getting ahead, material progress, moving up in society, being comfortable, moving up in status or class, getting ahead of others in possessions, having the latest technology, fashion, cars, appliances. In fact, unbridled capitalism at the expense of the vulnerable or those without privilege, those who carry within them the trauma of colonialism, racism, oppression of all sorts. Unbridled capitalism is killing our planet and our world. In our modern economic system, to get ahead means climbing on top of others. It means arrogance and bullying. It means competition. If what Jesus is saying here is give Caesar what Caesar deserves, as in some translations, we are talking about giving Caesar what Caesar deserves, and Caesar deserves a revolution of values and actions, of people rising up and demanding change of the heart, of priorities, of redistribution of wealth and power, of defunding the police, of living with less oil, choosing the earth over our short-term extreme comfort, of choosing people over the status quo with its embedded racism and classism. Giving God what is God's is our whole being, our whole lives, becoming on fire with justice and with not just putting up with the obvious casualties of capitalism, unwell homeless people living in tents, instead demanding that some of the sickening wealth we see shimmering in gigantic condos needs to be spent equitably for decent housing and supports for those on the street. Perhaps giving to God what God deserves means our passion, our commitment, are not settling for small-minded compromises of 5% affordable housing units in a new building if we're lucky. And why should some people work 3 part-time PSW jobs, receive no benefits, and then contract COVID on top of it? Why should our seniors die in for-profit homes while shareholders keep reaping the benefits? What if we turned over everything to God? What if we became on fire with passion for our fellow travelers on this planet, human and animal and plant life? What if we lived as if everything belonged to our Creator God? And then there's the clear wisdom of Autumn Peltier. at only 15 years old, leading us back to the old ways of seeing water as sacred, as suggesting what a radical statement to return to living without plastic, without electricity, without much of what we take for granted in today's world. She lays this all out in a speech to the United Nations. What if we embraced her bold vision of hope, learning from our ancestors who for thousands of years lived gently on the land and water? I was particularly struck by one of the statements she made in her speech, the eternal sacredness of her teaching. The sacred significance is that my mother comes from her mother's water. My grandmother comes from her mother's water, and my great-great-grandmother comes from her mother's water. Flowing within us is original water, lifeblood of Mother Earth that sustains us as we come from this land. The endless connectedness of us throughout the generations through water. How when we drink water, we drink the same water our ancestors drank thousands of years ago. The water in our bodies made up of water that has flowed in rivers and in the flesh of many beings. The sacredness of water shows us how we are not only all connected to each other on the planet, but we are connected to all life that has ever lived on our planet and in a long line through our mothers back for thousands of years. As Autumn teaches us, we can learn from the old ways, ways that didn't destroy the planet. I would ask us to ponder, look at the mess we're in right now. Maybe the way forward isn't to go forward at all, but to look inward and back in time at turning to a revolution of values and giving God what is God's, and seeing in water not only an essential of life, a basic human right, but actually as sacred, as a beacon directing us back to the Creator, back to our center, our inner light, as Quakers say, and away from the destruction of human life, back towards love of our beautiful and sacred earth with its water that holds and sustains us. There is hope. It's as near as our heart and our passion and our commitment to change. May God, our Creator, lead us back to the waters. I pray for each of us that we have the courage as individuals and as communities to work for justice fearlessly, giving everything to God, and to have the audacity to find new ways, possibly very old ways, to live humbly and gently on this beautiful Mother Earth. Let us imagine.